Usually when we talk about reading ancient mythology or epic poetry, there is this kind of underlying unspoken expectation of metaphor.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, it's almost like reading a really heavily stylized, abstract painting.
Mm.
You read about a mountain made of solid gold or an ocean made of milk, and the literature professor basically points at the text and says, well, there it is. That's an allegory for human enlightenment.
Right. They tell you the gold represents spiritual purity or something like that.
Mm.
We're sort of conditioned to look for the moral of the story, the
Exactly.
psychological archetype. I mean, we are taught very early on not to look for, say, GPS coordinates in a myth.
Right. Spiritual, not literal.
Mhm.
And, I mean, it's a very clean way to categorize human history.
Yeah.
It keeps our mythology safely contained in the realm of imagination, separated by this thick, comfortable wall from the hard, empirical realities of the earth sciences.
It does. But then you step into the world of the Valmiki Ramayana, and specifically the source material we are looking at today. And that literature textbook is just thrown entirely out the window.
Just completely out the window.
Because we're looking at a narrative landscape that completely rewrites the rules of engagement with ancient texts. It demands a totally different analytical framework.
So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are taking a custom-tailored journey for you, the listener, into a premise that sounds, on its face, like absolute science fiction.
It really does.
But it's rooted in some of the most rigorous geological cross-referencing I have, honestly, ever seen. The core question we're unpacking today is this.
Mm-hmm.
What if one of the world's oldest and most reviewed epic poems isn't just a spiritual masterpiece, but an incredibly precise 1.2 million-year-old geological map?
Yeah. And specifically, our source material today focuses on the Valmiki Ramayana, narrowing in on the Kishkindha.
Right, Sarga 40.
Exactly, Sarga 40. So
Yeah.
to give you some narrative context, this is the chapter where the Monkey King, Sugriva, is dispatching his massive army of Vanaras, the monkey warriors, to the east to search for Lord Rama's kidnapped wife, Sita.
Right, he's standing in front of this vast army, just giving them turn-by-turn, landmark-by-landmark directions. Like, walk here, cross this specific river, look for this specific mountain range, sail across this bizarrely colored ocean.
But the massive twist in the documents you've provided for us to analyze is how it treats those directions.
Yeah.
This source material cross-references these ancient Sanskrit verses, which describe an eastward journey not with other myths, but with modern paleomagnetism, tectonic extrusion models, and deep-sea bathymetry.
It's wild. The mission for today is to attempt to reverse engineer the globe based on Sugriva's instructions.
Right.
So the source material asks us to apply a specific theoretical model to the Earth to make this map work. It's a model of an expanded Earth.
But expanded Earth, yeah.
We're talking about an Earth from the Treta Yuga, which the text timeline places approximately, 1.2 million years ago?
Roughly 1.2 million, yeah, according to the Puranic timeline.
And it had a much larger physical footprint, a diameter of roughly 20,800 kilometers.
And to really understand the physical implications of that, we have to look at the water.
Okay.
Because the Earth's total volume of water was spread over this vastly expanded surface area, the global sea levels would have been effectively 3,000 to 5,000 meters lower than they are today.
Wow.
So we're going to take that model, rewind tectonic drift, mathematically unspin the continental plates, and see if Sugriva's ancient directions actually align with the sunken submarine ridges of our modern Pacific Ocean.
For anyone listening who loves a genuine, aha moment, a real paradigm shift, this deep dive is going to completely rewire how you view the intersection of ancient global texts and modern science.
It really is the ultimate geographic cold case.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we are going to trace a map, we have to start at point A.
Yeah.
And finding point A is actually the very first massive stumbling block for traditional historians.
It is. The starting line is where the conventional geographical interpretation of the Ramayana breaks down almost immediately. Let's look at Kishkindha, the capital of the Monkey Kingdom, where Sugriva is giving these orders. In modern popular belief and local tradition, Kishkindha is widely associated with the area around Hampi in the southern Indian state of Karnataka.
Which, I mean, if you've ever seen photos of Hampi, makes a lot of visual sense.
Oh, absolutely.
It has these incredible, massive boulder formations that look like a landscape built by giants or monkeys. It feels very mythic.
It definitely looks the part.
But geographically, for this specific chapter of the text, putting the starting pin in Hampi creates a massive, totally insurmountable paradox.
A total paradox. Because if you're standing in Hampi down in South India and you follow Sugriva's explicit instructions for the Eastern search party, The geography simply does not exist.
Right.
He tells this eastern detachment to look along the rivers Bhagirathi, the Ganges, the Yamuna, the Sarayu, and the Kosi.
And if you pull up a map right now and you put your finger on Hampi and you draw a line straight east,
You're in the water.
yet you are just dragging your finger across the Bay of Bengal. You're in the open ocean. All of those rivers Sugriva mentioned, the Ganges, the Yamuna, they are strictly to the north.
Hundreds and hundreds of miles north of Karnataka.
So if Sugriva sends a search party east from Hampi, they are immediately swimming. They're nowhere near the Yamuna River basin.
The geographical grid just fails instantly. So the source material introduces a foundational correction based on that expanded Earth premise and the tectonic layout of the Treta Yuga.
Okay.
It argues that the original capital of the Vanara Empire, the true Kishkindha, wasn't in southern Karnataka at all.
Where was it?
It was located much further north, right at the meeting point of the Malwa Plateau and the Aravalli mountain range.
Which would put it on the modern-day border of Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan.
Exactly. The coordinates provided in the text peg this ancient Kishkindha between 23.5 degrees and 24 degrees north latitude and between 75 and 76 degrees east longitude.
Wait, if you're a geography nerd, that 23.5 degrees north latitude should immediately jump out at you.
It really should.
That is the Tropic of Cancer. It runs right through the ancient city of Ujjain. So the source document is basically anchoring the entire starting grid of this global map to the Ujjain latitude.
Right. And moving that starting pin is what suddenly makes the textual paradox vanish.
Like magic.
Almost. If you place your absolute center, your point A, at 75 degrees east longitude on the Malwa Plateau, the entire terrestrial map provided by Valmiki aligns perfectly.
Wow.
Looking directly east from the Ujjain latitude, the rivers mentioned by Sugriva, the Son, the Kosi, the Bhagirathi, they all fall perfectly into a straight eastward corridor.
I do want to throw a bit of a wrench into this, though, because I know there's one detail in the text that causes a lot of debate among scholars.
Oh, the rivers.
Yeah, when Sugriva is listing these eastern rivers, he explicitly mentions the Sindhu and the Saraswati in the eastern direction. And, I mean, when anyone with a basic knowledge of South Asian geography hears Sindhi, they automatically think of the Indus River. But the Indus River is way out west in Pakistan. If Sugriva is telling the eastern party to look for the Indus, then our new map is broken again, just in the opposite direction.
The source material actually anticipates that exact skepticism. It addresses it by looking really closely at Valmiki's geographical awareness in subsequent chapters.
Okay, so what does it say?
Well, the text proves that Valmiki explicitly knew the difference between the grand western Indus River and a separate, entirely different eastern river that just shared the same name.
Wait, really?
Yeah. In Sarga 42, when Sugriva gives directions to the Western Search Party, the one led by Sushina, he explicitly directs them to the primary Indus River meeting the ocean, the Sindhu Sagara Sangam near modern-day Karachi.
Okay, so Valmiki places the main Indus definitively in the west. He wasn't confused about where the biggest river in the region was.
He was highly accurate. We also have to look at the linguistic context. The Amarikosha, which is an ancient Sanskrit thesaurus and vocabulary lexicon, it notes that the word Sindhu can refer to that specific massive western river, sure, but it also functions as a generic geographical term for any major river or substantial water body.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
And in the Malwa region itself, originating from the Vidisha area, there is literally a river called the Sindh River, alongside another called the Kali Sindh. They flow northeast and meet the Yamuna.
Oh, wow, that is so specific.
Mhm.
So he is referencing the local eastern Sindh, not the western Indus. But what about the Saraswati he mentions? Because the legendary Saraswati River is also generally associated with the northwest.
The text specifies the Triveni Saraswati. This refers to the Triveni Sangam at Prayagraj, where the subterranean or mythological Saraswati is said to converge with the Ganges and the Yamuna.
Right, the confluence.
Exactly. When you stand on the Malwa Plateau and look eastward along that 23.5 to 24 degree latitude band, the eastern Sindh River, the Triveni Saraswati, Kashi, Magadha, right out to the Bengal Basin, they form a flawless, straight, horizontal corridor to the east.
You know, I like to think of this like a GPS on your phone. If you're trying to navigate through a dense city and your starting GPS pin is accidentally dropped like 3 miles south of where your car actually is.
Every direction is going to be wrong.
Exactly. Every single turn-by-turn direction your phone gives you after that is going to lead you into a brick wall or down a one-way street. The directions aren't inherently wrong. Your starting pin is just in the wrong place.
It's a great analogy.
By moving the GPS pin of Kishkindha from Hampi up to the Malwa Plateau, the entire continental grid just clicks open like a combination lock.
The terrestrial geography suddenly matches the text perfectly. But as this monkey army eventually leaves the Indian subcontinent and heads across what is today the Bay of Bengal, we hit our next massive geological hurdle.
Oh, right, the water.
And to understand how they crossed it, we have to deeply understand the physical reality of a world with drastically lower sea levels.
Because according to the text, as they move further east, the landscape becomes almost fantastical. Sugriva tells them to search mountains entered into the sea, and to cross various islands populated by strange beings, islands that are rich in precious metals.
And the phrase mountains entered into the sea is actually a highly accurate geological description of a submerged mountain range.
Really?
Yeah. Specifically, the source correlates this to the Arakan Andaman Ridge. Today, if you look at a modern map, you see the mountains of Myanmar, and then curving down into the ocean is a chain of islands, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands.
Right, so if you were listening and picturing this, imagine an archipelago of tropical islands surrounded by a deep blue ocean.
Yes, but the source asks us to visualize this with the global sea level, effectively 3,000 to 5,000 meters lower.
Because the water is spread over that massive 20,800-kilometer diameter expanded Earth.
Right, so how does that fundamentally change the landscape?
It changes it from an oceanic archipelago into an impassable continental wall?
Exactly. With 4,000 meters less water, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands were not scattered islands at all. They were merely the tallest exposed peaks of a massive, continuous submarine mountain wall that stretched unbroken from Myanmar all the way down to the Indonesian archipelago.
Wow.
The water levels were so low that the continental shelf was completely dry.
So it wasn't a sea crossing at all. It was a high-altitude mountain trek.
Yes. It was a physical terrestrial barrier. And as they cross this massive mountain wall, Sugriva directs them to specific subsequent lands, Suvarnadvipa, which translates to the Island of Gold,
Okay.
Yavadvipa, the Island of Seven Kingdoms, and Rupiadvipa, the Island of Silver.
And the source correlates these mythological-sounding islands with incredible precision to modern tectonic blocks in Southeast Asia, right?
Very precisely, yeah.
So Suvarnadvipa, the Golden Island, matches the Sumatra Massif, which has historically been one of the richest gold-producing regions in the ancient world. Yavadvipa corresponds to the Java and Sunda Basin platform. And Rupiadvika, the Silver Island, corresponds to the Philippine bloc, specifically the Luzon and Mindoro regions, which are globally known for their abundant precious metals.
But this introduces a really fascinating linguistic and geological nuance.
Oh?
The text specifically calls them Dvipas, islands, plural. It describes them as distinct, separate land masses that the army has to cross one by one.
Wait, I see where you're going with this, because if we look at the Ice Age maps that a lot of people are familiar with, the maps of ancient human migration, Southeast Asia wasn't a bunch of islands back then.
No, it wasn't.
It was one giant continuous landmass that we call Sunda land. So why is Sugriva calling them separate islands if the sea levels were supposedly lower?
To resolve this, the source material relies on a geological concept called extrusion tectonics, or escape tectonics, which was pioneered by the French geologist Paul Taponnier back in the 1970s.
Okay.
We have to look at the violent collision of the Indian tectonic plate with the Eurasian plate.
The crash that built the Himalayas.
Exactly. When the Indian plate, moving incredibly fast by geological standards, violently smashed northward into the Eurasian plate, the sheer, unimaginable pressure didn't just push the crust upward to create the Tibetan Plateau and the Himalayas.
Right, the crust can't just all go up.
No, the continental crust had to go somewhere. The pressure squeezed massive chunks of the Asian landmass, specifically the Indochina block laterally, pushing it south and southeast.
I always try to visualize this using a block of soft plasticine or modeling clay.
That's a good way to look at it.
Like, imagine you put a square of clay on a table. Now take your fist and smash it into the top edge of that clay. The clay doesn't just squish downwards into the table. It squirts out sideways, escaping the pressure of your fist. Or like squeezing a wet watermelon seed between your fingers. It shoots outward laterally.
That lateral escape is extrusion tectonics. The Asian continent literally squirted Southeast Asia out of the way of the Indian collision. The source points out that during the Treta Yuga, the time of the Ramayana, this process was still unfolding. These lands, Sumatra, Java, the Philippines, were indeed separate tectonic islands, dvipas, separated by deep trenches and straits, exactly as Sugriva described them.
So they just hadn't merged yet.
No. But over time, moving forward into the Dvapara Yuga, two massive geological shifts continued. The relentless tectonic compression from the Tibetan collision kept squeezing these island blocks closer and closer together.
Right.
And simultaneously, global cooling and severe glaciation locked up vast amounts of the Earth's water in ice caps, lowering the sea levels even further.
So the ice caps act like giant sponges, sucking the water out of the oceans and exposing the shallow seafloors between these islands.
Precisely. By the time of the Dvapara Yuga, those separate islands had smashed together and the water between them had vanished, forming the single, continuous, massive landmass that modern geologists call Sundaland.
This is a point that requires us to really stop and think about the preservation of knowledge.
Yeah.
Because the author of the text didn't call it a massive continent. He called them islands.
What's fascinating here is that an ancient poet chose the exact correct geological term for that specific epoch.
Right. If this text was written or heavily edited much later, when it was definitively Sundaland, the authors would have described a singular, unbroken landmass. But they didn't. They knew they were separate.
It implies a geographical memory that is staggering to contemplate. But even if we accept that these were separate islands, as we track the monkey army further east across these dvipas, we encounter an even bigger problem.
Which is?
A mathematical geometry problem that seems to break our straight eastern search corridor entirely.
Right. Let's look at a globe as it exists today. We started at Ujjain, which is firmly planted at 23.5 degrees north latitude. If you draw a straight horizontal line from Ujjain to the east, going across the map between 22 and 24 degrees north, you cross northern Myanmar, southern China, maybe Taiwan.
You don't hit Java.
No, you do not hit Sumatra or Java. Java is currently sitting way down near the equator at like 8 degrees south latitude. It is thousands of kilometers south of our search corridor. So how on earth did an army walking in a straight horizontal line eastward hit islands that are currently scattered far to the south?
To solve this geometry problem, the source material introduces the hard science of paleomagnetism, specifically focusing on a phenomenon called characteristic remnant magnetization, or CHRM.
If you aren't a geologist, that sounds incredibly dense. How does paleomagnetism actually work in practice?
It's actually a beautifully simple concept at its core. It relies on the behavior of certain types of rocks when they're formed, particularly volcanic rocks like basalt.
Right.
When magma erupts from a volcano or a mid-ocean ridge, it is incredibly hot, obviously. But as that molten rock begins to cool, it reaches a specific temperature threshold called the Curie point.
And what happens at the Curie point?
Below the Curie point, the iron-rich minerals within the cooling rock suddenly lock into place. But before they lock, they align themselves with the Earth's ambient magnetic field at that exact moment in time.
I see.
They act like billions of tiny, microscopic compass needles frozen in the rock, pointing directly to wherever magnetic north was when the rock was born.
So millions of years later, a geologist can find that specific layer of basalt, dig up a chunk of it, and the iron inside it will still stubbornly point to the magnetic north of the past, even if the rock itself has been moved.
Exactly. Modern geologists use specialized drill rigs to extract cylindrical core samples of these ancient rocks.
Right.
They take these cores into highly shielded laboratories to block out the modern magnetic field, and they measure the ancient magnetic alignment trapped inside. This allows them to track not just how far a continent has drifted linearly, but crucially, how a landmass has rotated or twisted over time.
Because if the rock's internal compass needle is pointing 50 degrees to the right of where modern north is, it means the whole piece of land the rock is attached to has physically spun 50 degrees since it cooled.
Exactly. And the source points to extensive paleomagnetic studies conducted by renowned geologists like Fuller, Hall, and Oda Fuji. They spent years studying the rock cores in Southeast Asia, Borneo, and the Philippine Sea Plate.
And what did they find?
Their findings completely rewrite the map of the Pacific. They found that these islands didn't just slide south from the mainland, they spun.
They spun significantly, right?
Very significantly. The paleomagnetic data conclusively proves that the Borneo Block and the larger Sundaland Craton have rotated 45 to 50 degrees clockwise since their original formation.
Clockwise. So if you're looking down at Borneo from space, imagine turning it like the steering wheel of a car to the right.
Yes. And the Philippine Sea Plate, which holds the Marianas and Luzon, rotated even more dramatically. Measurements show it rotating anywhere from 50 to 90 degrees clockwise.
Okay, so this is where the source material asks us to do a reverse reconstruction.
Right.
We have to mathematically unspin the globe to see what it looked like during the Treta Yuga. If these massive landmasses rotated 50 to 90 degrees clockwise over millions of years, we need to grab them and twist them 50 to 90 degrees counterclockwise to put them back where they started.
And when you apply that reverse rotation, the results are geometrically astonishing.
It fixes it.
The entire map shifts. The Iraqi-Andaman Ridge, which today curves sharply south toward the equator, flattens out into an almost horizontal east-west alignment, sitting right around the 22 to 24 degree north latitude.
Wait, it moves all the way back up to our Ujjain latitude.
The math puts it exactly there. Sumatra, which currently sits on a northwest to southeast diagonal, swings up and becomes perfectly horizontal east to west. Borneo moves up to align horizontally right beside it.
So if you're trying to picture this, if you stand at Ujjain and you look east on this unwound, pre-rotation expanded globe, you don't have to turn south at all to hit Indonesia.
No. By unspinning the plates, you create a literal, unbending terrestrial and island bridge straight across the Pacific Basin.
Wow.
Arakan, Sumatra, Java, the Philippines, they all line up in a massive horizontal eastern corridor. The Monkey Army could walk straight east from the Malwa Plateau, never deviating from their latitude, and the land would be directly in front of them the entire way.
The implications of that are wild. We're taking a mythological poem, applying advanced magnetic resonance data from volcanic rock cores, and finding out that the poem's navigation was absolutely flawless for the paleogeography of that era.
It's incredible.
But the Pacific Ocean is massive. As they leave the Philippines and enter the deep Pacific, what do they encounter next? Because this is where the text gets incredibly vivid.
The very next major landmark Sugriva mentions to the Eastern Army is Shishir Parvat. He describes it as a magnificent, imposing mountain whose white, snow-capped peaks seem to touch heaven itself.
On the modern map, if we follow our unwound, horizontal 24-degree north corridor out past the Philippines, we hit the Mariana Arc, the Izubonan-Mariana system. But the Mariana system is globally famous for being a trench. The Mariana Trench is the deepest underwater canyon on the entire planet. How does a deep hole in the ocean floor correlate to a towering, snow-capped mountain that touches heaven?
To understand this, we have to return to our baseline rules for the expanded Earth model. Global sea levels are 4,000 to 5,000 meters lower, and we have mathematically unspun the tectonic plates.
Okay.
Today, the Mariana Ridge is mostly underwater, with only tiny volcanic islands perking out of the sea. But if you drop the sea level by 5,000 meters, that entire ridge is exposed.
It is no longer an underwater feature. It is an unimaginably massive, continuous mountain wall rising straight up from the dry abyssal plain of the Pacific floor.
It would have risen 6,000 to 8,000 meters high. It would have been one of the most imposing, terrifying mountain ranges on the planet.
That's huge.
And because of its sheer towering height, the peaks would have been glaciated and snow-capped, perfectly matching the name Shishir, which translates to cold or frosty.
But wait, how did it go from touching heaven to being a trench? Mountains erode, sure, but they don't turn into the deepest canyons on Earth just from rain and wind.
They don't. The mechanism here is a violent tectonic process called subduction erosion.
Subduction erosion.
Over millions of years, the heavy, dense basalt of the Pacific tectonic plate has been continuously diving or subducting underneath the lighter Mariana plate. As this massive slab of crust grinds downward into the Earth, it acts like a giant geological rasp.
Like taking coarse sandpaper to the underside of a wooden table.
Exactly, but on a continental scale. The descending Pacific plate physically scrapes away the underside of the Mariana mountain range, dragging the rock down into the Earth's mantle to be melted.
Wow.
So the mountain wasn't just slowly submerged by rising waters. Its physical foundation was steadily destroyed and dragged downward, drastically reducing its height and forming a trench over the eons.
So on our ancient map, it was a towering, snowy wall. And the source document notes that this wall connected all the way up to Japan, right? Which means Japan wasn't an island either.
Correct. The Izubonan-Mariana Arc physically connects to the Japanese mainland. Furthermore, the paleomagnetic data we discussed earlier shows that Japan itself wasn't always a curved island chain sitting off the coast.
Oh.
Research by Oto Fuji demonstrates that Japan actually opened up away from the Eurasian continent like a set of double doors.
What does that mean, double doors?
The southwestern half of Japan rotated clockwise, and the northeastern half rotated counterclockwise. As they swung open away from the coast, they created the basin that eventually filled with water to become the Sea of Japan.
So before those double doors swung open, Japan was lying flat against the Asian coast, forming a solid, unbroken eastern wall with the Mariana mountain range. It was literally the absolute edge of the continent.
It was the boundary line of the world they knew, and once the army crosses that towering Mariana Wall, they drop down the other side into the deep, dark basin of the true Pacific.
Right.
Sugriva calls this terrifying new expanse the Ikshirasa Ocean, which translates directly to the ocean of sugarcane juice.
The text describes it as a terrifying, pitch-black ocean, filled with giant, violent beings that catch their prey not by biting them, but merely by pulling on their shadows from below.
Geographically, this corresponds perfectly to the Northwest Pacific Abyssal Plain. It is one of the deepest, darkest, and most expansive oceanic trenches on Earth.
And what about the shadow catchers?
The description of shadow-catching beings is an incredibly evocative, almost scientifically perfect metaphor for the reality of that biome. It describes the giant squids that inhabit those crushing depths, reaching up from the pitch-black darkness to drag prey downward.
Oh, wow, that's terrifying.
It also accurately describes the massive oceanic vortexes and downwellings common in deep basins that can pull debris or ancient ships inexorably downward as if grabbing their shadow.
This brings us to a sequence in the text that, on a first read, just sounds like pure hallucinogenic fantasy. Sugriva lists the sequence of oceans the army must cross, and the names are wild.
The colored oceans,
Yeah.
yes.
He says they will cross the Sura Sagara, the ocean of wine, then the Grita Sagara, the ocean of clarified butter or ghee, and then the Dadi Sagara, the ocean of curd or yogurt. A sea of melted butter and yogurt. How does the source material possibly rationalize this geologically?
It sounds like fantasy until you apply the lens of paleoceanography.
Okay.
The source argues that these aren't descriptions of literal food floating in the ocean. They are brilliant observational categorizations of the physical properties and viscosity of the water in these specific, distinct geographic zones.
Let's test that. Walk me through the Ghee Ocean, the Grita Sagara.
Mm.
Where is it on our map, and why on earth would the water look like melted butter?
Following our eastward corridor, this correlates to the Johnston Atoll in the north-central Pacific Flat Basin.
Right.
This specific area lies within the equatorial doldrums. The doldrums are a maritime zone famous among sailors for having almost zero wind. Because there is no wind to whip up waves or chop, the water becomes incredibly still, almost glassy and viscous.
So it's flat.
Yeah.
But ghee is oily and yellow.
The source notes that with the drastically lower sea levels of the Treta Yuga, the exposed edges of this basin would have featured highly active natural pelagic and hydrocarbon seeps.
Oh, like oil leaks.
These are natural fissures where oil, lipids, and deep earth hydrocarbons leak into the water. When you combine these natural oil slicks with an utterly windless, glassy surface under the equatorial sun, it creates a thick, viscous slick on the water.
Wow.
To an ancient observer, it wouldn't look like churning blue ocean. It would literally look like a vast, flat, golden yellow pan of thick, melted ghee.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
The ancient sailors weren't being poetic or writing myths. They were being terrifyingly literal about the viscosity and chemical makeup of the water they were trying to row through.
Exactly.
Okay, what about the Kurd Ocean? The Dadi Sagara. A sea of yogurt.
This one requires an understanding of fluid dynamics. The Kurd Ocean corresponds to the Hawaiian flexural arch and the deep carbonate platforms leading up to the Hawaiian Islands. In this specific region, you have deep, incredibly fast-moving ocean currents that travel unobstructed across the Pacific floor. But suddenly, they slam into the massive 10,000-meter underwater cliffs of the Hawaiian seamount chain.
It's like hitting a brick wall at the bottom of the sea.
Exactly. When these massive horizontal currents hit that vertical wall, the water has nowhere to go but violently upward. This process is called intense upwelling.
Right, upwelling.
This violently churning water rushes toward the surface, but as it does, it mixes with the calcareous, chalky ooze that coats the seafloor in that region.
What is chalky ooze?
It is the accumulated calcium shells of billions upon billions of microscopic plankton called diatoms. It is basically suspended chalk.
I see it. I actually have a perfect analogy for this.
Yeah.
Think about a barista making a latte.
Okay.
You start with milk, which is just a thin liquid. But when you put the steam wand in and blast it with high pressure, injecting intense physical churning into a restricted space, the physical structure of the milk changes. It foams up into a thick, white, clotted froth that sits on top of the cup.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. The upwelling currents slamming into the seamounts act like that steam wand. They whip the calcium-rich water into a thick, white, clotted marine foam.
Wow.
To an ancient observer trying to navigate it, the water wouldn't look like a blue ocean. It would look and behave exactly like thick, churned white curd or yogurt.
It is paleoceanography encoded as mythology. Which brings us to the climax of this entire ocean crossing, the Kshira Sagara, the ocean of milk.
Yeah.
And rising out of it, the text describes the Rishabh Parvat, a massive white-peaked mountain with a beautiful crater lake at its summit called Sudarshana Sarovar.
We are now arriving at the East Pacific Rise and the Hawaiian Emperor Seamount Chain.
Okay.
The ocean of milk refers to the famously white, frothy, violently crashing surf that constantly pounds the Hawaiian Islands. And Rishabh Parvat perfectly matches the geological profile of Mauna Kea.
Mauna Kea is the massive shield volcano on the Big Island of Hawaii, right?
Yes. And even today, despite being located on a tropical island in the Pacific, Mauna Kea is so monstrously tall that its summit is frequently snow-capped.
Wow.
It is a massive white peak rising directly out of a white-capped ocean. And at its summit, exactly as the Ramayana describes the Sudarshana Sarovar, there is a prominent crater lake. Today it is called Lake Waiau.
But if we look at a map, the Hawaiian Islands don't form a straight horizontal line.
No, they don't.
The island chain runs on a sharp diagonal. If we're walking straight east from Ujjain, how does our straight horizontal corridor hit Hawaii perfectly?
Once again, the modern map is deceiving, and we must look at the tectonic history. The source points out a major geological event known to science as the Hawaiian Emperor Bend.
The bend.
If you look at the underwater bathymetric track of the Hawaiian seamounts, they go straight for thousands of miles, and then suddenly there is a sharp, massive 60-degree bend in the chain.
I've seen that on ocean floor maps. It looks like a bent elbow pointing north.
Geologists date the creation of this bend to about 47 to 50 million years ago. It occurred when the entire Pacific tectonic plate drastically, suddenly changed its direction of movement. This was likely due to the immense global stress caused by the Indian plate colliding with Asia. The shock wave changed the Pacific plate's trajectory.
So it shifted the whole plate.
Yes. Before the shift, the Hawaiian Ridge and the associated islands around it, like Wake Island, were aligned much more horizontally, almost parallel to the equator.
So before the bend, they were sitting right on our Ujjain latitude corridor. The geographical alignment remains flawless.
It does.
But we need to move past the geology for a minute, because when the source document starts digging into the local Hawaiian mythology and comparing it to the Ramayana, that is where this ceases to be just a geological curiosity and becomes something profound.
The cross-cultural mythological alignments are indeed staggering. The Ramayana makes highly specific claims about what is located at this extreme eastern edge of the world.
Right, let's break down exactly what Sugriva tells his army they will find there. He says the mountain has 3 massive distinct peaks, calling it Trishira. Second, he says this land is marked by a golden palm tree that acts as a divine flag or pillar holding up the sky, called a Ketu. Third, he says this is the resting place of the serpent deity Ananta, a being of immense serpent and fire that lives inside the earth.
All right.
And right behind all of this, he says, is the Udaya Parvat, the mountain of sunrise.
Now lay those 4 specific textual descriptors over the local, indigenous, animistic mythology and physical geography of the Hawaiian Islands.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The 3 peaks I could buy as a coincidence, but it is highly accurate. The Big Island of Hawaii is globally famous for being composed of exactly 3 massive, dominant volcanic peaks: Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa, and Hualalai.
Exactly.
When the sea level was lower, these wouldn't look like a cluster of separate islands. They would look like a single, terrifyingly huge mountain with 3 distinct heads rising from a massive base. Kshira. But how does a golden palm tree fit into a volcanic island?
Yeah. Well, look at the indigenous flora and their animistic traditions. In native Hawaiian culture, their most sacred, revered tree is the hala tree, which is a distinctive type of palm.
Really?
In their foundational mythology, the hala tree is literally referred to as the pillar of the sky, a divine flag planted by the gods when the world was made to separate the heavens from the earth. The conceptual match to the Ketu is flawless.
That is wild. And the serpent of underground fire. Sugriva is describing a specific deity, Ananta.
The central, most powerful deity of Hawaiian indigenous mythology is Pele. She is the goddess of volcanoes, lava, and the serpentine tubes of fire that flow beneath the earth.
Serpentine tubes.
Right. The Hawaiians believe she physically lives inside the caldera of the volcanoes, a serpentine energy of fire supporting and creating the islands from the underworld.
That is a one-to-one conceptual match for Ananta or Sheshanaga, the fiery serpent who supports the earth from the underworld in Hindu cosmology.
It really is.
But what about the Mountain of Sunrise, the Udaya Parvat? Does Hawaii have a Mountain of Sunrise?
Right next to the Big Island, on the neighboring island of Maui, is another massive, towering volcano. The indigenous Hawaiian name for it is Haleakala.
Wait, let's pause on that. You're saying the indigenous name for the volcano sitting exactly where the Sanskrit text says the Mountain of Sunrise should be translates to what?
Haleakala translates literally from the ancient Hawaiian language as House of the Sun, the place where the sun is born or rises, the Udaya Parvat.
That transcends geographic coincidence. That implies shared physical observational knowledge.
It certainly does.
The statistical probability of an ancient Indian poet sitting thousands of miles away in the subcontinent, randomly guessing that a mountain across the ocean had exactly 3 peaks, worshipped a palm tree as a pillar of the sky, revered a volcanic fire serpent, and had a neighboring peak literally named the House of the Sun. I mean, it's zero.
If we accept the premise of the source document, it strongly suggests that the Ramayana is preserving a literal, physical account of a global circumnavigation, or at least a highly advanced deep Pacific exploration from an incredibly distant epoch. The cultural memory was preserved in parallel on both sides of the ocean.
But the monkey army's journey doesn't actually end at Hawaii, right? Sugriva tells them to go just a little further, to the absolute edge of the eastern world.
Yes, the final frontier. After crossing the Ocean of Milk and passing the 3-peaked mountain, they enter a sweetwater ocean that contains a terrifying apocalyptic anomaly called the Vadavamuka.
Vadavamuka.
Sugriva describes it as a massive submarine fire that constantly consumes the waters of the sea.
An underwater fire that eats the ocean. What is the modern geological equivalent of that?
The East Pacific Rise. This is a massive tectonic boundary where the Pacific plate is pulling apart from the plates of the Americas.
Okay.
All along this massive underwater ridge is a dense, highly active belt of hydrothermal vents, famously known to marine biologists as black smokers.
These are the vents where magma from the Earth's mantle breaches the crust and vents directly into the freezing ocean water.
Correct. The water is superheated by the magma to over 400 degrees Celsius. But because of the immense hydrostatic pressure at that depth, thousands of meters down, the water is physically prevented from boiling.
Wow.
Instead, it creates massive, towering chimneys of black, mineral-rich, superheated fluid billowing underwater.
To an ancient explorer, seeing this massive belt of underwater fire, boiling water, and black smoke billowing from the seafloor, a submarine fire consuming the sea, is actually a highly accurate observational description.
It is the only way to describe a hydrothermal vent without modern chemistry. And from there, they hit the absolute end of the line. The true Udayagiri and the Gate of Brahma.
The source material clarifies a crucial point here, correcting a lot of earlier interpretations. The final destination, the Gate of Brahma, isn't just another ocean or mythical realm. It is the solid continental shelf of the Americas.
Specifically, it correlates to the Trans-Mexican volcanic belt and towering peaks like Pico de Orizaba in Mexico.
If you are listening and try to picture this, remember our vantage point. If you are standing on the dry floor of the Pacific Basin, 5,000 meters below modern sea level, and you look east towards the coast of Mexico, you aren't seeing a pleasant, sloping, sandy beach.
No, you are looking at the sheer continental slope. It would have appeared to these explorers as an unbroken, golden-hued wall stretching endlessly from north to south. A wall that was 8,000 meters tall.
Utterly impassable.
A physical end to the world. And from an astronomical perspective, relative to Jambudvipa, the Asian continent where they started, this American coastline represents the 180-degree longitude line.
Because the Earth is a sphere, 180 degrees is the exact opposite side of the planet.
It is the absolute end of the eastern horizon, the celestial gate. Beyond this wall, Sugriva says, is just darkness.
Which is astronomically correct.
Exactly, because if it is high noon in India, it is midnight on the other side of that wall in the Americas.
The alignment is just perfect. We started at Ujjain, crossed the unspun Indonesian archipelago, walked through the dry Mariana Trench, sailed across oceans of ghee and curd, hit the Hawaiian seamounts, and slammed directly into the Trans-Mexican volcanic belt.
All in a straight line.
And the entire journey maintained that 23.5-degree north latitude corridor perfectly.
It is a stunning, mathematically sound geographical reconstruction. But as with any paradigm-shifting theory, there is a massive point of friction between this model and standard academia that we have to address.
Yes, the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
The timelines. I know you're probably thinking right now because I thought the exact same thing when reading this.
Yeah.
How do you date this to 1.2 million years?
The timeline discrepancy is the greatest battleground between the traditional geological community and the Puranic texts.
Because you mentioned earlier that the Hawaiian Emperor Bend happened 47 to 50 million years ago, according to standard dating. The paleomagnetic rotation of Borneo happened 40 to 50 million years ago.
Yeah.
But the Puranic timeline places the Treta Yuga, the era of the Ramayana, at roughly 1.2 million years ago. That is a discrepancy of tens of millions of years. How does the source document reconcile that massive gap?
The source document navigates this by proposing that Western uniformitarian geology and the Puranic cyclical Yuga system are essentially looking at the exact same physical evidence, the same bent seamounts, the same rotated rocks.
Okay.
But they are measuring the time between those events using completely different mechanical paradigms.
Break down uniformitarianism for me. What is the baseline assumption of Western geology?
Uniformitarianism is the foundational principle established by early geologists like Charles Lyell. The famous summary is the present is the key to the past.
The present is the key to the past.
It dictates that the slow, steady geological processes we see happening today, like the continents drifting at about the speed your fingernails grow, maybe an inch or two a year, have always occurred at that exact same slow, steady rate throughout all of Earth's history.
So if a continent like Borneo has rotated 50 degrees and we observe it moving an inch a year today, the math dictates it must have taken 50 million years to complete that rotation.
Exactly. It assumes a constant, unchanging rate of speed. But the Puranic model and the expanded Earth model the source relies on disagrees with that steady rate radically.
What does the Puranic model propose instead?
It proposes a catastrophic, cyclical timeline driven by cosmic mechanics. The document suggests that as the Earth moves through the massive epochs known as yugas, its physical orbit and distance from the sun subtly change.
Oh, wow.
This shifting gravitational stress causes the planet itself to physically expand and contract.
A pulsating or shrinking Earth.
Yes. And during these transitional periods of extreme planetary contraction, the tectonic shifts do not happen at an inch a year. The pressure builds up and releases in accelerated, catastrophic bursts.
So things move fast?
Very fast. Entire mountain ranges could fold, oceans could drain, and continental plates could rotate dramatically within the span of thousands of years rather than tens of millions.
So, if we follow the source's synthesis, they aren't arguing that the paleomagnetic data is wrong. The geographical events, the rotation, the bending, are real and indisputable.
Right.
But the clock used to measure how fast they happen is fundamentally different.
The physical evidence is the same. The interpretation of the velocity is what differs. This catastrophic model allows the source to place these massive tectonic shifts squarely within the 1.2 million year time frame of the Treta Yuga,
That makes sense.
aligning the geological reality with the human or Venara experience of it.
Which brings us to the most human question of this entire deep dive.
Oh.
If this is a literal map of a catastrophic changing Earth, how on earth did Sugriva, a king of the Venaras, possess it? Did he have a satellite in orbit? Did he have a massive navy of explorers mapping the globe for decades?
The text actually answers that question itself, and it is perhaps the most poignant detail in the entire epic. In Sarka 46, after Sugriva finishes giving these impossibly detailed global directions to his armies, Lord Rama is equally astonished. He asks Sugriva, essentially, how do you know the geography of the entire planet so perfectly?
And what is Sugriva's answer?
Sugriva explains that his knowledge wasn't gained through peaceful academic exploration or royal cartography. It was born of absolute primal terror. He tells Rama that he learned every corner of the globe while he was frantically running for his life, being hunted by his impossibly powerful and violent brother, Vali.
He didn't map the world because he wanted to conquer it. He mapped it because he was trying to hide.
He says he fled across every continent, every ocean, every mountain range, scouring the entire earth trying to find a single place where Vali couldn't reach him. He learned the location of the Gi Ocean and the three peaks of Hawaii not out of curiosity, but out of desperate survival.
Wow.
He eventually found sanctuary at Mount Rishimuka, which was the one specific place Vali was cursed not to enter.
That reframes the entire map. The greatest geographical map of the ancient world wasn't drawn by a scientist. It was drawn by a fugitive, running for his life, searing the landmarks into his memory.
It forces us to ask very deep questions about the nature of human knowledge and memory. How is truth preserved?
Right.
Modern science uses radiometric dating and paleomagnetic rock analysis to reconstruct the past, relying on technology to tell us what the Earth looked like. But here we have an ancient epic poem, passed down through millennia of oral tradition and eventually written in Sanskrit, that has seemingly encoded the exact same geographical fingerprints.
It is truly staggering. Just to recap the sheer scale of the journey we've been on today. We took a textural map that seemed fundamentally broken and moved the starting prime meridian from Hampi up to the Tropic of Cancer in New Guinea.
Right.
Instantly, a straight eastern corridor opened up across the globe.
We followed that corridor across the lowered ocean, utilizing the physics of extrusion tectonics to cross the unmerged towering islands of Sundaland.
We mathematically unspun the tectonic plates using paleomagnetic rock cores, turning the curved Mariana Trench back into the towering snow-capped Shishir Parvet. We crossed oceans of thick, slick pelagic seeps and frothy upwelled diatoms that perfectly describe the paleo-oceanographic conditions of Gi and Kurd.
We found the three peaks of Mauna Kea and saw the indigenous Hawaiian myths of Pele and the Hala tree, mirroring the Sanskrit texts flawlessly.
And finally, we hit the black smokers of the East Pacific Rise and slammed into the golden 8,000-meter continental wall of Mexico, the Gate of Brahma, the absolute end of the Eastern world.
It is a profound testament to the fact that the physical geography of the Earth leaves an indelible, permanent fingerprint on human storytelling if we only know how to read it.
It really does. At the start of this deep dive, we talked about how literature professors tell us to view these ancient myths like X-rays that are broken, requiring us to only look for metaphors and spiritual allegories, never literal truth.
Yeah, the allegorical approach.
But looking at the Valmiki Ramayana through the lens of this source material, that X-ray isn't broken at all. We've just been holding it up to the wrong light.
We've been judging an ancient text using a modern map instead of the map of the world as it actually was when the text was born.
Which leaves us with a final thought to mull over as we wrap up. If the Valmiki Ramayana successfully encoded a million-year-old paleogeography so accurately that it perfectly aligns with today's advanced paleomagnetic data and indigenous Hawaiian folklore, what other seemingly magical or mythological descriptions in ancient texts around the globe are actually literal, physical maps of a forgotten Earth, just waiting for our modern geological models to catch up?
A truly fascinating question to ponder.
Thank you so much for joining us on this custom-tailored deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning the maps you are given, and stay insanely curious.